Hello, folks, and welcome to this new edition of Living Word Live. We seem to be experiencing some technical difficulties, so if you are seeing some stuttering on this video, rest assured we are recording it on our end so that we can re-upload it and you can watch it without a problem. Now it seems like the stream is more or less steadying. We're fingers crossed. No, Gio, we're Christians. We're not supposed to have our fingers crossed. Hand prayers together. No, that's overly religious, Gio. We can't do that. Well, whatever the case may be, whatever it is that you allude to that.
Can I knock on wood?
Exactly. Whatever it is that you allude to, we hope that it stays well for the rest of the edition. But we are recording it just in case if we do have failures. That way we can re-upload it and you can watch the entire transmission without fail. Anyways, the question that we have for this evening's Living Word Live edition is, God, is he implicated in the Texas flash flood, which now seems to also extend itself to New Mexico? I know what some of you are thinking. Boy, these two are going to engage in things that might just be outright blasphemy. And we were to respond to that. If you're a believer, a red-blooded believer, and have never had these sorts of questions in your mind and had to answer them because there are those whom are disbelievers whom approach you with these difficult questions, then we would ask you, where have you attempted to actually find the appropriate answers, or conversely, looked to find out what the motivations are, the motives behind said questions, which is partly what we're going to talk about this evening and contextualize the questions that people are asking pertaining to the flooding and the deaths and things of that nature in a more, shall we say, meta-narrative in all of this. More specifically, answering the questions that people may have of, well, if God loves us so much, why would he allow X to happen? Or if God loves his children so much, why would he let this person die? Or all those questions, if you think about it, implicitly, they implicate God in a blame game of sorts. They imply that God is guilty of not only in some instances doing these things, but in others having the ability to do something. He should, he doesn't, and therefore it makes him evil. That is the essence of those questions, and we're looking to address the root and the beliefs behind those questions on this edition of Living Word Live.
Good evening, friends. Unfortunately, we Christians, we also suffer from, we have to keep up with the appearances. So very few will manifest these questions, these doubts, these things that go on deep within the soul and the heart. And then if you dare ask these questions, you publish them, all of a sudden the rest of them, even though they're thinking the same thing and asking the same questions, they go, how could you doubt God like that? But then there's that moment when people let their guard down and they'll go, why did brother so-and-so get hit with cancer? That's a fantastic family. They're always serving. Their kids are growing up in the admonition of the Lord. And look at the troubles they go through. And so what you don't sense, or maybe you do, is that behind these questions, they're implicating God, or they're asking God, how come this is happening to these people? Why have you not intervened? And so when these floodwaters came on the scene in the hill country region, when the Guadalupe River went up to, I believe it was 35 feet, and it rose 20 feet in something like 95 minutes, a ridiculous thing, the blame game started. There's a company called Rainmaker, and one of the principals of that organization is making the rounds throughout any and all television programs to answer questions about, is this the result of seeding water possibilities, and increment in water or shower possibilities within the clouds that are there? And of course, he went on to say that they're not playing God. To the contrary, I've seen a couple of interviews where he says we're actually serving God because he calls us to be stewards of nature and of creation, and we're actually helping people that need help where perhaps they haven't seen rain in a while. They're going through a drought. So he's cleaning his hands. And then the people of God are somewhat cleaning their hands by saying God is sovereign and all the other answers that we've heard for so long. We're taking another approach and another angle on this, obviously. And our angle and our approach is basically we're defending God on this one and on all of them. Because if you listen to some of the things that have gone on, for example, former Kerr County Commissioner Tom Moser described the country's flood warning system as simply pretty antiquated and marginal at best. So what do I hear when I listen to Mr. Kerr, to Mr. Moser,
Yep.
talk about what went on? This is a human issue. This is a human failure. Nevertheless, the people on television, the preachers, they need to bring God in because, this is an opportunity to criticize Christians, and Christians bring it in because this is our possibility of better rates. I sit here before you today telling you God had nothing to do with this. But he could have intervened. He could have stopped the water. He could have given these people a miraculous warning so they would not be there. It's amazing to me. It marvels me to see how much we supposedly enjoy free will and how much we really don't want God's will in our life. And then when things like this occur, all of a sudden we blame God. We implicate him as, if not completely guilty by not intervening. Let me say something right off the bat here. A lot of people blame God for unanswered prayer. And the truth of the matter is, when God says no to a prayer, it was still answered. Furthermore, if a prayer is to be answered, it has to be presented to God in his will. He's not going to do our will. And for most people, what this really means when we're talking about unanswered prayer is, I'm not getting what I want. For many others, when God does not intervene, it means I'm not getting the solution the way I want it. For example, Moses was not necessarily the solution that the Israelites were waiting for when they were calling out to God because the Egyptians were just stepping on him. He wasn't necessarily the solution that they were looking for. Joseph was not necessarily the intervention that first edition of Israel was looking for. Jesus was not the intervention that generation that saw him walk the land of Israel was looking for. So God does answer prayer. It's not always a yes. And he does intervene, but not in the way we want him to intervene. So I'll say it one more time in tonight's edition of this program. I think I can speak for both of us. We're here to defend God. He's not guilty of any of these things. These are human issues. And I believe if we stop the blame game, like Gio called it, then we probably improve the possibilities of God answering our prayers and intervening more on our behalf. Because how can you sit there, and I'll have something to share about something that James presented, which I see it as a principle, as a spiritual law, a little bit later on in the program. But how can you sit there and blame God and then also expect God to respond the way you think he should respond?
Very similar situation that is found in Job, when Job's friends were attributing all sorts of misdeeds to Job and even implicating evil doing on God's part, to the point where God's character was maligned.
Yes.
And Job has to intervene and ask for forgiveness, as it were, in a sense, for his compatriots there, because they had maligned God's character. And I don't know if you've noticed this. I'm sure you have if you've read your Bible, that God takes very good care to ensure that his character is not only unscathed, but that it reflects reality. Some will say, but then, Gio, you're sort of saying here that God can get away with certain things. It's about a reputational thing. It's not about keeping a reputation. It's about ensuring that people get an accurate view of who God is so that they can be drawn and saved. Remember that Jesus, we also find that the Apostle Paul and Peter, they reverberate, they echo this sentiment from Christ. where he says that because of the way that certain people whom say that they are acting in God's name will say certain things or teach certain things or behave in a certain way, they blaspheme the way. So you would see, and by the way, if you're in a position where you're being defamed, you are being slandered, you are being libeled, wouldn't you do something in order to save your name from being sullied? So suddenly, why don't we give the same consideration to God that we give to ourselves? See, these things need to be understood in the context of biblical righteousness, lest we begin to give ground to those whom hate God, and then they want to spread that seed even into believers' minds and hearts. Here's another thing that I want to say about all of this, and this will be part of our, like I said earlier, meta-narrative with respect to the general attitudes that engender these sorts of questions. You've already touched on it in one sense where you're saying that all of these questions are nothing more than a subtle cover, than a disguise for the capriciousness, and James talks about this, like you said, a capriciousness that we have in us, that when we don't get our way, we suddenly begin to blame God over these things. That's important to keep this in mind, folks, because remember, God is one who discerns the minds and the hearts. And if we're going to deal, as it were, if we're going to engage with God, then it's best that we do so in honesty with Him and with each other. Second point. Now, here's the third point I wanted to get to. Think about the essence of the way that the questions are formulated, and then understand the ramifications that are necessarily being ignored by all of this. I'll give an example.
Okay.
I'm a father. You're a father. It comes at a point where you have to send your son, your daughter into the world, understanding that there are dangers on a daily basis into that world. Does it make you less loving and less caring, understanding that they have to fly, so to speak, metaphorically speaking? You have to send your children out into the world so that they can be everything that God has for them.
To the contrary, if you are caring, if you are loving, you have to do it because you won't be around forever. So the years where you protect, and some would say overprotect, are over, or they're just about turning the corner. So you realizing that, you go, this is something that has to happen.
So if a tragedy befalls my son, your son, daughter, whatever the case may be, suppose some evildoer kills my son, kills your son, etc., etc., how does God take the blame for that? If a natural disaster, just as what has happened with respect to Texas, and has happened in the past, by the way, considering the multitudes of different things that involve, as it were, human activity.
Plus, this is an area that has a history of this, and people still decide, yeah, we're going to put our camp here, just like people that they should know better than in most of Florida, setting up a house
right
next to the beach.
Yes.
Once it's blown away by one of these hurricanes, they go, oh my God, everything that I worked for is gone in one swift moment. Well, why did you place the house there?
That's why I mentioned human activity.
Yeah.
How many times we live in Florida, we've seen this throughout the years. There's a massive Category 4 hurricane, and it's coming in, it's buzzing in through one of the coasts. We think we'll ride it out. Massive devastation. The house doesn't matter. The cars doesn't matter. Your possessions don't matter. What matters is your life.
But why did you set it up there anyway?
Exactly. That's a good question.
Because if you know that this is a trouble area.
But I like the view.
Okay.
I like the view. But it goes back to our earlier point.
So there's a risk to it. And when the dices don't roll the number that you need the dices to roll,
it's God's fault.
It's God's fault.
It's God's fault.
Yep.
So you have to understand that this oversimplification, or rather this reductionist way of simply saying God's at fault for this, it ignores, like I said, it completely ignores the ramifications of human decision-making and intervention in these things. And as you were mentioning, now there are some officials here whom are running for the hills with respect to this, because there seems to be some, shall we say, indications and some evidences that there may, we're not saying there was, there may have been some things going on, whether it be incompetence or other, shall we say, maladies.
So the advanced warning system is not all that it should be. That's been said. they have this individual. He's one of the principals of the company. I believe it's called Rainmaker, and he's
Yes.
out there saying we stopped way ahead from what would have been prudent to say. Hey, stop seeding these clouds, so they're not taking any blame. So who's to blame then? Well, the people that like to criticize Christians and the Christian faith, they go, where is God in all of this? Well, I'll say it one more time. If you are completely responsible for your actions by setting up camp in a place that maybe you shouldn't be setting up camp there, building a house where perhaps you shouldn't be building a house, etc., then you are fully responsible for your actions. You cannot, after the disaster, after the terrible things happen, go to God and say, why didn't you show up? Even more so, if God was prompting your heart not to set your house here, set the camp here. So while a lot of people or Christians are saying, you know, God is sovereign, and at the end we'll see why He allowed this to happen. Let's face it, just about all the things that are happening now that we look at them and we go like, wow, why did brother so-and-so end up getting cancer? Well, we do a quick research, and brother so-and-so has been abusing his body, feeding it improperly, not getting the proper rest. The body starts to fail him, and he's a believer.
Yes.
Why didn't God help him? And I know what some
Why
people
didn't He
are
help
thinking.
Himself?
Well, you see, many Christians are like experts in twisting certain portions of the Bible, and they'll go to Mark 16,
Yes.
and they'll say, but wait a minute, why wouldn't God heal them? It says that they can take serpents in their hands, and these serpents won't damage them, and they can drink poisonous things, and they won't be poisoned. Now you're talking about a group of people that will take some text, which, by the way, some theologians believe they don't even, talking about these particular texts at the end of Mark 16, they believe they're interpolated, they were added later on. But let's just say, for the sake of our conversation, that they're part of the original Mark writings.
We're just supposed to tempt God now? Is that the interpretation?
Exactly. So we look back and we see Paul dealing with a fire situation, drying his hands. He didn't say, is there a viper here that I can provoke to bite me so I can exhibit God's power? That's not the way it went down.
By the way, there have been documented cases. We've seen the videos. I'm sure some of you have seen the videos where there are some churches that say, Mark 16 says this, let's bring in a cobra, let's bring in, and watch, God is going to heal him, and they end up dying.
So we can see from the context of these verses that if through an attack of Satan, in other words, if you are not choosing to remain ignorant, if you are not negligent about your discipleship and something happens, then I believe God has said in His Word, I commit to intervention. I commit to helping you out. But if you choose ignorance, if you neglect your obligation to show yourself approved by knowing God's Word, etc., and you do stupid things, you're going to pay the price for your stupidity.
Right.
And then to add on top of the injury, insult by saying, why didn't God do this or that? On top of that, you're going to insult God and kind of blame Him. I think you need help, honestly. You need help. You need to find the church. You need to find a minister that will help you get out of that mentality, because you're not in a good place, friend. If this is the way you think, you are not in a good place.
There's something deeper here that I think we need to spend a few minutes on, and it's based on everything you've just talked about. A lot of Christians are unfortunately conformist to the thought processes of the world, which includes the idolatry surrounding comfort and convenience. It's something that we have surveyed before, where contrary to the biblical mandate that we see in Romans 12, where it says that we ought not conform ourselves to the rules, the regs, the thought processes, the behaviors of the world, but have our minds renewed by the Word of God and by the Spirit of the Almighty. What ends up happening? We allow we Christianize it somehow, and we allow the system to seep in, to infiltrate itself. The system's ultimate consequences, as it were, does the damage to us, and then we begin to blame God and say, God, why didn't you protect me? Well, first and foremost, why wouldn't you do the proper thing, whether it be health-wise or otherwise? Why wouldn't you do the necessary thing to ensure, as it were, that certain things don't befall you because of bad decision making? What does that have to do with God? Now, I know what some of you are thinking, Gio, but again, then what about those that do take care of themselves? What about those that ultimately are healthy persons? They ensure that they're doing the right thing, et cetera, and tragedy befalls them. Need I remind you, dear Christian, that we live in a fallen world where these things are part and parcel of the world that we live in, because death came into the world via sin, and ultimately man's worst problem, which is eternal separation from God and death for all eternity separated from God, Jesus resolved that on the cross. So if you die, as it were, guess what? You die with Christ. The Bible says you sleep for a time, yet you are in heaven, and you will have a glorified body in the future, all these other things that eschatologically the Bible talks about. So that issue has been resolved. So again, we continue to go back to the essential point here. Why does God take the blame? Ultimately, I think it goes back to something that is in our hearts, and even many Christians will refuse to admit it. And it is this: we see that this life, and I'm not downplaying the importance of doing proper, engaging in proper behavior and thought in this life. Please don't misunderstand my next declarations, but it's important to see everything in their proper contextual understanding, especially biblically. We have a tendency to see the here and now as the ultimate end all, the zenith of all existence, instead of understanding that there is a tomorrow, as it were, that also requires our attention. So that necessarily leads to a thought process where if I don't get what I want here and now, especially based on worldly principles and idolatry of comfort and convenience, then somehow God is to blame. And boy, oh boy, I could live a better life now if God would just intervene on my behalf. There's an awful lot. That to me is a big time slander of God and his character.
I remember listening to, he's no longer with us, Oral Roberts. Yes, the founder of the university. He lost a son, and he was bitter about that. And while praying about that, he said that God said, then forgive me.
Man.
And so I'm
That
sitting there.
no longer makes him
listening.
God anymore.
Well,
Because if God is imperfect, then
and that's not the only time that I thought, this guy is telling people that he hears God, and then you listen to stuff like that, and I don't think that was God. God told him supposedly that he was going to blend science and faith. He was going to fuse those two.
mm-hmm.
And that was the reasoning behind the hospital that he built that went belly up.
Yeah.
And then he also said, if I don't get X amount of dollars by X amount of time, then God said he's going to take me. And somebody said, here's the money.
I would have told people, don't give. Let's see if it's true.
But the point of that,
talk about emotional blackmail.
yeah, that first point that I was trying to make, where God says, then, forgive me, I'm sorry, ask me.
Ask me for forgiveness.
No. Ask me to ask forgiveness of you. I'm going like, whoa. So God is not perfect after all.
Yeah.
And God does the wrong thing.
The implication was there.
Yeah. And then people buy this stuff and they go, God, I'm going to forgive you. You wronged me on this one. God never wrongs anybody. And this brings me to what I was saying at the beginning that I want to share with you.
Can I interrupt you quickly? Because what you're saying just goes back to what I said before, what you were just saying. It proves that there is this attitude of entitlement that even permeates a lot of the church that leads to these sorts of conclusions and questions.
Yeah, and this also proves that slowly but surely modern theology has turned God into one of us.
Right.
And he's flawed, and he's got bad ideas, and he misses the target every now and then. And so, yeah, all of this is happening even as we sit here trying to defend God. And some would say he doesn't need anybody to defend him. Well, Paul said he was placed for the defense of the gospel, so I'll take up this task. Even if God himself didn't ask me to do it, in my soul, in my mind, in my heart, I perceive the need to do this. So I'm doing it.
So why did Jesus feel the need, we're going to use that phrase, feel the need to defend himself constantly from the false accusations that they were launching against him? Well, this is Almighty God amongst us.
Again, you mentioned something earlier, and I've been listening to preachers for the longest time. I've been around the block a couple of times. I remember Robert Schuller saying that God was prideful. And I said, now I have to listen to the rest of this. And he said, the way he is zealous about his name and his image and his character proves that God is prideful. And you cleared this very, very well a few minutes ago when you said it's not about clearing his name because he's prideful. He wants people to see with clarity his nature, so that they will be drawn to him and the people will be saved. Sure. So here's what I think of James 1:13 through 15. I think this is a principle. Let's go ahead and share that, and then I'll throw a couple of comments in there. Let no one say when he is tempted, notice no one, let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Yes. Then, when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, excuse me, when it's full grown, brings forth death.
Progression there, right?
Yeah, and what's the principle? I don't see the principle. Somebody would say, well, how about if we look at it this way? Let no one say when he is fooled, I was fooled by God. Because God doesn't go around fooling people.
It's a good way to look at it.
How about if we place it in this other context? Let no one say when he or she is ignorant, God made me ignorant.
Right.
So when you start blaming God for things that he has nothing to do with, what do we expect God's reaction to be? I expect him to be understanding, and he is, to the point that he doesn't destroy us all, even though we constantly defame him.
Sure.
Blaspheme his name.
Yep.
And so when issues like hurricanes and the Twin Towers and now the flash floods and the rest of the things happen, take a step back and ask yourself, what is the human activity behind all of this? This guy that was talking about the Project Rainmaker, and this has been going on since the 1940s.
Yes.
And this is not the only company.
U.S. government had a hand in all of this, by the way,
well,
behind the scenes.
They kept flooding certain areas of Vietnam.
Yes.
So that they couldn't get the ammunition they needed to their front lines.
Yep.
So this has been going on for a while.
Yep.
And this company that I've talked about is not the only one. There are other organizations out there that are trying to throw up particles, listen to this, so they can shade the earth from the rays of the sun.
Bill Gates is behind a massive project. He's monetizing that.
You tell me if behind the scenes they're not flirting with these things, messing around with these things, and then when the problem is created, they're going to go, oops, not us. No, had nothing to do with that, because they have the answers to the questions that they know will come up just in case trouble breaks out. Knowing all of this, and this is just a couple of examples of the issues that go on behind the scenes, when later on even the people in government find it convenient to stir up the religious questions that in essence get us to fight about where was God in all of this, when in reality was the hand of man doing these things, but they refuse to own the problem that they have created.
You know, I'd like to emphasize something you just said, because it also serves as an important reminder not to be shaped by whatever it is that the culture is peddling, even subtly. Since the advent of the 24-hour news cycle, there is this inherent thing within it that shoves people, not lightly pushes them, shoves them into being reactionary, because that is the very nature of the 24-hour news cycle. It's to get you to give the attention, then they'll sell you advertisements. So they constantly, every 5 minutes, every 6 minutes, they have to roll something new to keep your attention.
And it's novella-like.
Yes.
In the next segment, and now you're stuck there watching commercials.
Correct. Notice that this has insidiously, but subtly at the same time, led us to be reactionary about these things. I'm going to develop an opinion about this immediately, even though it's known that these so-called major news events, the mainstream media and even independent media in many instances, they get about 80 to 90% wrong of the information from the onset because everybody wants to be first to grab attention. That has led to this attitude in general society, even amongst Christians, to immediately lead to certain conclusions whereby they say the questions need to be asked about this, that, and the other thing. And caught up in all of that attitude is the question of why would God allow? That's part of the reactions that I'm talking about here. Let me ask you a question, folks. Does the Bible not inform us believers that we have to examine all things? What does that examination include? Jesus says that if you're going to ensure that you bring an accusation against someone or believe something, the general principle is it better be done by the witnesses of 2 or 3. It better be solid. It better be foundational, because one of the things that God detests is false witness, especially against his nature and against his good
And
name.
the idea behind that is credible
Right.
witnesses,
Exactly.
not just a John Doe that you picked up from the street.
But notice, this is to your point earlier, how the mainstream media news cycle, that entire complex, has led us to develop this general attitude and this general reaction instead of asking, wait a minute, why do I react in this way without having the complete information at my disposition? If the Bible tells me that I have to judge with righteous judgment, why am I allowing these systems, these entities, to dictate the way that I ought to, some will say interpret, some will say react, whatever the case may be, in these things, when the Bible actually calls me to a higher standard of verification, of examination, of subscribing to the truth, not jumping to conclusions. Jesus himself, I know that there's this phrase that it's pretty old. It says, don't judge a book by its cover. They pull that from Christ in a sense when he says that you have to judge with righteous judgment. But a lot of Christians don't follow that. And unfortunately, that's something that they ignore to their own peril, to the point where it can perilously lead close to this very thing that we are serving this evening of sullying God's good name, blaspheming his good name with questions such as we are surveying this evening.
The Bible, I will end with this, at least my part. The New Testament talks about people that hate God. They are inventors of evil.
Yep.
And what saddens me is that Christians don't pick up on the fact that there are people out there that hate God. They invent evil. They create malicious things. They launch them. These things go out and damage. They hurt. They pummel people. This is the part that saddens me. Christians don't pick up on this. And the hatred that these people feel against God is sown into their lives, into the lives, the minds, the mentality of Christians in the form of, where was God? Why didn't he intervene? How come he didn't answer that prayer? So be very careful, because I'll say it one more time. These are people that hate God, and they spew their hate constantly. But in order to get it inside the church, they need to reframe it, phrase it a bit differently. And it usually comes in the form of questions. Where was God in all of this? Why did he not intervene? I can tell you this, friends. When it's all said and done, God's hands will be clean on all issues. And so if you make that your starting point, I think you will be in a much better place as you see things happening and you try to understand them. Make sure you understand from the get-go that God's hands will be clean, completely clean on all issues, and you will be in a better road to understanding what is really going on behind some of the things that are happening.
There you go, folks. That's what we have for you on this edition of Living Word Live. A couple of housekeeping items. We did say on Sunday that we would reveal our new name on this edition, and we are going to do that shortly. Some of you may be joining us for the first time and are asking, Living Word Live sounds like such a beautiful, and we think so, name. Why change it? We've noticed for the past few months that not only YouTube, but even on Rumble, the algorithm, as it were, is bunching us up with a bunch of other Living Word Lives, therefore, in a sense, tamping down our outreach from the content that we work hard to put for your edification and that we want other people to watch also. So we thought it was time, as it were, that we change the name so as to lift ourselves, hopefully, with the name change, we can lift ourselves out of that ambiguity in the algorithm and stand out a bit more for others to view the content. Some of you are asking, well, we've been waiting for the big reveal. What is the new name? Some of you may think that this is out of left field, but we are rather fond of the name, and we'll explain why. The new name is going to be Irrespective.
Irrespective of what I think, irrespective of what everybody else thinks, that's just the way it's going to be.
That's just the way that it's going to be. Some of you may be asking, is that going to change now that you're going to change the name of the channel? Is my subscription going to suffer? Or do I need to subscribe to a new channel? We're not going to start a new channel. We're just going to change the name of the channels on both YouTube and Rumble. So we encourage you, if you have not yet subscribed, subscribe. And then once we make the changes, you should be updated and you should be subscribed completely. Also, don't forget to donate. It helps us to continue to put out this content for your edification. The links for the outlets that we use to put out these contents, and also our podcast, Substack, Telegram, et cetera, that we can find out what we're doing next. Please follow us there, donate. All the links to all of these things are in the description box beneath the video player. So the last time that we'll appear as Living Word Live will be Sunday. As of next Wednesday, we will begin to appear as Irrespective. By the way, there's also another update that I want to give the audience. We've given it some thought, and we thought about doing this a few months ago. We put it on standby, but I think we're revisiting it again, because we've noticed that there are persons whom are either hesitant or will place certain things on the chat, and they actually want to converse with us or even ask us questions about these topics. So one of the things that we thought about doing is taking the Wednesday editions of what is now Irrespective and actually hosting them on X, because on X, you'll be able to actually interact with us live, vocally. It's not going to be a video thing, but it will be an audio thing where you will actually be able to interact with us and ask questions and interact with us on these topics. So that's something to look forward to. Also, we'll be opening an X account where we'll be able to begin transmitting also on Wednesday. So stay tuned for that. We'll give you more details in the not too distant future about the implementation of all these updates.
Got a nice thank you here, and I want to appreciate the people that chime in and are always encouraging us to continue. So it's our privilege to bring these topics to you, and we will continue to tackle the difficult topics. We may not get it perfect all the time, but we give it our best shot. We give it our best shot, and by that I mean we try to look at the issues through the lenses of the Bible and share that with you. If we do miss it, I think we have enough, maybe you more than I, or maybe me more than you, humility to say, hey, we missed the boat on that one.
Oh, so we're not like Trump, that he says he's never, ever had to ask God for an apology.
Irrespective of what we ourselves think.
Correct.
So, yeah, thank you for reaching out, and thank you for sharing some of your time with us.
That's all the time we have left for this edition. We noticed that the transmission went off after about 20% of it. It went off without a hitch. Anyways, I'm going to keep an eye on it after the transmission is done to make sure that the video more or less came out decent. If not, we'll re-upload it. We recorded it on our end, and it recorded without a hitch. So we'll keep an eye on it. But for those of you that did join us live, thank you so much for staying for the entirety of the episode. The next edition of Living Word Live will be on Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you then. Until the next occasion that we gather, may the Lord shine his face upon you.